The Winter War, a conflict between the Soviet Union and Finland, erupted in November 1939. It was more than a territorial struggle. It was a clash of ideologies and wills against the backdrop of a brutal winter. The tensions leading to the Winter War were rooted in the geopolitical aftermath of World War I and the Russian Civil War. Finland had gained independence from Russia in 1917, but the Soviet Union, under Joseph Stalin, sought to reclaim lost territories and establish a buffer zone against potential invasions. The Soviet demands for territory, particularly for the Karelian Isthmus, were met with fierce resistance by the Finnish government. The conflict ignited when the Soviet Union launched an invasion of Finland on November 30th, 1939, following the shelling incident at Mainila, which the Soviets used as a casus belli. The world condemned the Soviet aggression, but Finland stood virtually alone against the might of the Red Army. Against a Soviet force of over 500,000 men, the Finns were vastly outnumbered and outgunned. Despite this disparity, the Finnish forces under the command of General Carl Gustaf Emil Mannerheim utilized their knowledge of the terrain, employing guerrilla tactics and strategic retreats to their advantage. The Mannerheim Line, stretching across the Karelian Isthmus, became a symbol of Finnish resistance. The harsh winter conditions played in favor of the Finns. With temperatures plummeting to -40 degrees Celsius, the winter significantly hampered the Soviet advance. The numerically and technologically superior Red Army was ill-prepared for the extreme cold and the dense forests and swamps that characterized the Finnish landscape. The Soviet tactics, overly reliant on large conventional formations and direct assaults, proved ineffective against the mobile and elusive Finnish troops. Furthermore, the purges of the 1930s had decimated the Soviet officer corps, leaving a leadership vacuum that critically impacted the Red Army's operational capabilities. The Winter War attracted international attention. Finland garnered sympathy and support from various nations. Although material aid from France, the United Kingdom, and the United States was limited, it bolstered Finnish resolve. Volunteers from Scandinavia and other parts of the world joined the Finnish ranks, but the most crucial assistance came in the form of weapons and ammunition. The conflict concluded with the Moscow Peace Treaty, signed on March 12, 1940. Finland was forced to cede 11% of its territory to the Soviet Union, including the entire Karelian Isthmus and parts of Salla and Petsamo. Nevertheless, Finland retained its independence and demonstrated to the world the potential for a smaller nation to resist a larger aggressor. The Winter War left an indelible mark on both Finnish and Soviet military history, influencing tactics, strategy, and international perceptions. For Finland, the war fostered a sense of national unity and resilience, embodied in the term sisu, a uniquely Finnish concept denoting extraordinary determination and courage. On the Soviet side, the Red Army's embarrassing performance led to significant military reforms that would have implications for its effectiveness in World War II. One night in 1939, the eerie silence of the Finnish forests was shattered when a Soviet division stationed at the border fell victim to a horrifying event. The Soviet division was part of the larger force invading Finland during the Winter War, advancing into Finnish territory with the confidence befitting one of the world's largest military powers. Their mission was simple: secure strategic positions and crush Finnish resistance. However, the harsh winter and dense forests presented unexpected challenges, making the environment as much of an enemy as the Finnish soldiers. On that fateful night, the division, confident in their numbers and the might of the Red Army, set up camp in a dense wooded area. Battling the bitter cold and dwindling supplies, the soldiers were unaware of the ordeal that awaited them, far different from the conventional warfare they had been trained for. As night fell, a palpable sense of unease settled over the camp. Initially dismissed by the commanders, this unease soon escalated into terror. According to fragmented reports from survivors and accounts pieced together from testimonies, an attack occurred suddenly and violently without warning. The assailants, described only as something unknown, savagely descended upon the camp. Witnesses spoke of shadows moving with unnatural speed, screams piercing the night, and a force that seemed to emanate from the very essence of the winter forest. Trained to fight human enemies, the Soviet soldiers were utterly unprepared for the chaos that ensued. Attempts to organize a defense were futile. The enemy, according to the sources, was neither clearly visible nor comprehensible. The darkness of the night and the dense canopy of trees worked to the attackers' advantage, making it impossible to discern the nature of the threat. When dawn broke, the extent of the carnage became clear. The campsite was a scene of devastation, with scattered tents stained with blood. The bodies of Soviet soldiers lay strewn across the snow, some mutilated beyond recognition, others lifeless with no visible wounds. The initial assumption was that Finnish forces had launched a surprise attack, utilizing guerrilla tactics to devastating effect. However, this theory was questioned over time. The nature of the injuries, the lack of any defensive wounds, and the absence of traces or evidence of a large attacking force perplexed military analysts and researchers. Speculations arose, with some suggesting the involvement of supernatural forces, drawing upon local folklore that spoke of malevolent spirits and creatures inhabiting the Finnish forests. Others posited that the Finns had orchestrated a psychological operation, but no definitive explanation could be found due to the sheer scale of the massacre. The mysterious massacre of a Soviet division in the Finnish forests during the 1939 Winter War remains one of the most enigmatic chapters of the conflict. Neither eyewitness accounts nor Soviet military archives shed light on what truly transpired that night. Soldiers recounted hearing unsettling noises in the darkness and sudden, chilling screams that pierced the silence, seeming to come from all directions at once. One witness described the air growing thick, making it difficult to breathe or move, and everyone panicking. Another spoke of seeing shapes at the edge of the campfire light, moving with a speed and fluidity that couldn't be human, yet too deliberate to be dismissed as mere shadows or the wind in the trees. Survivors mentioned an oppressive sense of dread that enveloped the camp, almost palpable. Soviet military archives regarding the incident are said to be devoid of any information that official authorities would deem detrimental to morale. The scant details available from these records suggest a swift and thorough investigation by Soviet officials. Yet, the conclusions drawn remain classified or simply absent from the public record. The archives briefly mention the division's deployment and objectives, followed by a sudden and unexplained communication blackout. Subsequent entries speak in vague terms of a tragic loss and unforeseen circumstances. The conspicuous absence of any acknowledgement of an official enemy encounter aligns with the lack of concrete evidence pointing to a Finnish military attack. Consequently, the discrepancies between eyewitness accounts and the few details gleaned from Soviet records have fueled speculation and theories about what truly occurred. Some researchers propose that official Soviet authorities engaged in a cover-up, possibly to avoid undermining the perception of the Red Army's invincibility, suggesting that their soldiers encountered something they couldn't comprehend or control. Others argue that the inconsistencies and lack of detail can be attributed to the chaos of war and a desire to forget or move past an inexplicable tragedy. The event's largely unreported or unacknowledged status in Soviet military history has led to suggestions that it was seen as an embarrassment, something to be forgotten within the annals of the Red Army. The possibility of a large group of predatory animals inflicting such devastating casualties without evidence of a struggle is unlikely. Another theory proposes that the harsh weather conditions played a decisive role in the soldiers' deaths. Hypothermia, disorientation, and even hallucinations caused by the extreme cold could have triggered panic and chaos within the camp, leading to a tragic case of mass hysteria and self-inflicted harm. While environmental factors undoubtedly contributed to the challenges faced by Soviet forces during the Winter War, the peculiar nature of the injuries suggests an external cause of death beyond the cold. The possibility of a covert operation by Finnish military units designed to instill fear and confusion has also been considered. This theory suggests that the Finns, intimately familiar with the terrain and adept at guerrilla warfare, may have launched a surprise attack on the Soviet division using psychological warfare tactics, such as mimicking animal sounds or exploiting local myths. This could have created fear among the soldiers, leading to a breakdown of order. While this theory is intriguing, concrete evidence is lacking, and Finnish military records from the period do not corroborate the existence of such an operation. Some of the more speculative explanations propose the involvement of supernatural entities, drawing inspiration from Finnish folklore, tales of haunted spirits, and creatures dwelling in the forests. Stories of the forest spirit Huldra and other mythological beings have been woven into the narrative, suggesting that the soldiers encountered forces beyond human comprehension. This theory lacks physical evidence and is largely dismissed by historians. However, it highlights the depth of the mystery and the human tendency to seek explanations for the unknown. Another psychological explanation proposes that a combination of extreme stress, isolation, and fear triggered a state of mass hysteria among the soldiers. Stories of the Finns' supernatural warfare tactics may have circulated among the Soviet troops, priming them for a psychological breakdown. This heightened state of anxiety could have led to soldiers turning on each other in a tragic spiral of fear-driven violence, a chaotic mix of paranoia and confusion. The possibility of chemical or biological weapons being used, either through Soviet mishandling or a deliberate attack by the Finns, has also been explored. Exposure to a toxic agent could have caused the soldiers' disorientation and subsequent deaths. However, there's no historical evidence of such weapons being used by either side during the Winter War, making this theory less likely. Psychological warfare is the planned use of activities to influence the minds of individuals or groups, shaping their thoughts, behaviors, and attitudes to achieve desired outcomes. This type of warfare is often conducted through information, propaganda, and other psychological operations. Its goals are to demoralize the enemy, break their will to fight, motivate one's own people and allies, and sway neutral groups to one's side. The history of psychological warfare is as old as human history itself, and it has been an integral part of war strategies. In ancient times, verbal messages and symbols were used to demoralize the enemy, while in the modern era, with the advancement of technology, tools such as radio, television, the internet, and social media have come into play. During World War I, stories emerged of angelic figures appearing over British soldiers at the Battle of Mons, protecting them from the advancing German forces. This was later attributed to a combination of psychological stress, folklore, and religious imagery experienced by the soldiers. However, the Angels of Mons story shares commonalities with the Finnish incident in its blend of war, mystery, and the supernatural. While not a mystery in the traditional sense, the story of the Ghost Army, an Allied unit tasked with deceiving German forces using inflatable tanks, fake radio transmissions, and other forms of deception, demonstrates the power of psychological warfare. Similar to the theories surrounding the Finnish operation, the Ghost Army used misdirection and illusion to achieve military objectives, highlighting the role of deception and the unknown in the dynamics of conflict. Psychological warfare, fear, and superstition are age-old forms of conflict aimed at undermining the enemy's morale and will to fight without engaging in physical combat. The use of fear, superstition, and word-of-mouth stories as tools in this endeavor has been documented in various military conflicts, including the eerie events experienced by the Soviet unit in the Finnish forests during the Winter War. Psychological tactics exploiting the soldiers' innate superstitious nature may have played a crucial role in the unfolding of these mysterious events. Psychological warfare aims to exploit vulnerabilities in human psychology, using fear and uncertainty to sow discord and terror in the enemy ranks. In the context of the Winter War, the isolated environment of the Finnish forests provided fertile ground for such tactics. To compensate for their lack of manpower and resources, the Finns resorted to ingenious methods, such as leveraging the psychological impact of the unknown and eerie landscape on the Soviet soldiers. As soldiers faced the constant possibility of death, they turned to superstitions and rituals for comfort and a sense of control over their fate. Since Soviet soldiers came from diverse backgrounds across the vast Soviet Union, they brought with them a mosaic of beliefs and superstitions. The incorporation of local Finnish mythology into this already potent mix of fears and beliefs could have further amplified the psychological pressure on the soldiers, making them more susceptible to panic and irrational behavior. The events and narratives that impacted the morale of the Soviet groups have contributed to the lore surrounding the Finnish forests. This legacy underscores the power of psychological tactics, particularly in the context of military conflicts, and the enduring impact of fear and superstition on human psychology. What are your thoughts on psychological warfare? Feel free to share your insights with us in the comments. Until next time.